If my outfit is different than the thumbnail, it's because I had to refilm this because I was completely out of focus. But hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing your standard booktube, which is of course a monthly wrap up, and we are covering the month of September. Like I said, I already filmed this once. I was ready to get this out early to be on top of things, but that wasn't in the plans, I guess. But that's okay because we're going to make this version even better than the last time. But yeah, I'm just going to cover what I read this month, what I liked, what I didn't like, why, and I read a lot this month, so I'm really excited to talk about these books. As always, we are starting with manga, and I read Yona of the Dawn Volume 42 this month. This is by Misaho Kusanagi, and it is a shoujo fantasy series. It's about a young princess who uncovers a coup, or is in the middle of a coup. She runs away from home and is discovering the world for the first time, meeting friends along the way, learning about her kingdom, learning about the myths and legends and lore, and kind of getting caught up in a legend herself. Really fantastic series. There's a reason why I'm on volume 42 of it. Next we have Kimi no Todoke, which is another older shoujo title, another classic shoujo title. This is a contemporary high school slice of life type story. There's romance, there's great friendship, but the real heart of this story is Sawako, who is the main character. She is a girl who is often mistaken for Sadako, which is the girl from the Ring movies. She just kind of always leaves the wrong impression on people, and a lot about this is her making friends, her having relationships with people that also get the wrong impression put upon them by other peers around them. And it's a really sweet contemporary story. This is one I'm looking to possibly collect in the future, and it was really fun to continue it, especially because this volume starts to deal with Chizuru, who is my favorite character from the series. Stepping away from my manga series, I read a manga memoir, which is My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness by the pen name Nagata Kabi, and the tagline for this is 28 years old, no confidence, no direction, never had sex. I feel like that's a fairly good kind of introduction into what this is. It's this author reflecting on her early 20s when she got out of school, just kind of how her life kind of had a downward spiral because of mental health issues, because she didn't have a direction. I've been meaning to read more memoirs. I particularly love graphic memoirs, so this was really interesting. It talks about sex and gender as well as depression and the coming of ageness of just leaving school, and it was really interesting to look into a person's mind, so I do recommend that. And then to round out the manga, we are ending with a webtoon or a comic, and that is Morgana and Oz by Miyuli. This is a webtoon that follows Morgana Winterberry, and she is a witch, and her family of witches has a kind of standoff relationship with a group of vampires. They're trying to rectify that, and things go horribly wrong. Morgana accidentally turns Oz, a vampire, into a cat, and from there they are trying to fix his curse while also trying to figure out what's going on between their families. I have been a longtime follower of this particular artist. I really love their work. I found Morgana and Oz before they were a comic. I just fell in love with them, and so it was so exciting to see when they got turned into a webtoon and read the first season of that. I need to continue because I know the second season is currently airing, but it was also really great to get to collect a physical form of the first volume, which covers maybe half of the first season, I would say. But yes, I love Morgana and Oz. I do want to see where their story continues on from here, but it was nice to pick up a physical version and read it like that for the first time. And now with manga and comics out of the way, we can discuss the books I read. And I think I'm gonna go from least favorite to favorite. Lowest star rating to highest star rating. So the first book that I unfortunately rated pretty low at a 2.5 is going to be Can't Spell Treason Without T by Rebecca Thorne. This was definitely my least favorite book so far, and it was a really big disappointment because I was really excited for it. The more I reflect on cozy fantasy that I've read, mainly Legends and Lattes, I don't feel like the genre has really stuck the landing, at least as far as I've read so far. But Can't Spell Treasons Without T is a cozy fantasy. We are following a sapphic couple, Reina and Chianthi. Chianthi is this all-powerful mage. She is like the once-in-a-lifetime mage magic user. And then we have Reina, who is the queen's personal bodyguard. The queen of her kingdom is a tyrant, however, and so Reina kind of gets sick of dealing with her, and so she finally decides to run away with her long-distance girlfriend, Chianthi. So they go to this remote little town thinking they can escape, thinking they can set up their tea shop and bookstore, and they do that, but of course their past comes along to trouble them, while they also get involved with the town and their magical issues. So there's a lot going on in this story. It just didn't stick the landing with me personally. I felt like I didn't get enough development from the relationship. Again, we are set up in a relationship that is already established. We didn't get to see how it began. We didn't get to see how it developed, how it worked as a long distance relationship, or how it didn't work. There is internal conflict between the characters, between themselves, because both of them can't really like take a break and can't really stop themselves from putting themselves in danger. And if we had more development, I felt like those conflicts would have been done better, and I would have also cared about the characters more. As it stands, I just couldn't really care about the characters. They were just, you know, mushy and in love without any kind of build-up or context for me to care about that. And on top of that, the pacing just was all over the place. There was a lot going on, all these little mini-sodes almost, but just the pacing as a whole, it really felt like it was slogging. I had a hard time really finishing this and getting through it. On top of that, the writing just wasn't for me. It just didn't really do anything for me. It didn't really help to bolster the characters. I thought this was middle of the road at best. It just felt like it had a lot of missteps, needed a lot more fleshing out, needed a lot more revising, because there are a lot of good elements here, but the problem is I think a lot of cozy fantasies, especially this one, are trying to be like slice of life animes, and they haven't quite nailed down how to put the episode format into book format, or how to adapt that kind of slice of life feel into a book format without it just feeling kind of blah. Because I personally like quiet moments, I like slice of life, but it is, I think, really difficult to do in book form, and this just did not nail it. The next book I have is a 3-star, and that is A Liaison with Her Leading Lady by Lottie R. James. This is a Harlequin, and like many Harlequins, this was again kind of middle of the road, which is unfortunate because this Harlequin in particular had a lot going for it. There were some really memorable lines in here. I even tabbed one of them. Getting into what this is a historical romance. I believe it is the Romantic period, so right before or after Regency. It's 1830s, so I guess, yeah, right after Regency, but before Victorian. But this is taking place between two women, so that's what intrigued me. But the other point of interest for me is that this takes place on the stage. This is a romance between an actress who is taking on her father's theater and a woman who is a female playwright, but who has quit her playwriting, and it's Ruth, our main character, who is trying to bring her back to the stage so that she can help this theater along before it falls into ruin after her father's death. So there's a lot of these great little nuggets for the characters, but the relationship, the sex scenes were pretty good in my opinion. There were some really great writing moments, like it really felt like this author was a good writer, but because it has like a page limit, because it probably wasn't in development a super long time, there were a lot of missteps where the pacing was off. It was hard to tell when the relationship had really grown between these characters because it really felt like they're really standoffish with each other. There was one line about, you know, it being like a week or so, and then suddenly, you know, they're making out. So there was definitely like relationship problems. It's hard because like I could see the chemistry, like the physical chemistry between the characters, but honestly, I don't really know why they were connecting, why they were really liking each other. Overall, this felt like really shallow, unfortunately. Like we just didn't get a lot of depth from these characters, so that I personally just was like, relationship, okay, I guess. And the other thing about this is that this is a Harlequin historical, so I was expecting more historical elements. This really felt like it could take place during any time period. I wanted to learn more about the theater scene. I wanted to learn more about how things worked in theater. I wanted, you know, more about the costumes that they were wearing and the just regular clothes that they were wearing. It really felt like we could be in any time period almost. Didn't feel like a lot of research really went into this beyond the bare minimum, which is unfortunate because this is a really interesting setting, so I wish it would have played a bigger role in the story. So overall, this is a lot of the problems with Harlequin is that they're just not super fleshed out. You know, they're just supposed to be one quick reads and done kind of a thing, which is, again, unfortunate because this story was really intriguing. There was a lot of elements here, and if it had a lot of development, it could have been a really, really spectacular novel. But unfortunately, it was just kind of so-so. The next book I read was also a 3-star, and that is The Absence Underground. This is by Jamie Paxton, and this is just a cute, sweet, short, little young adult fantasy novel with a sapphic friends to lovers plot. But in this book we have Esme and Sybil. They are basically one step away from living on the street. They are both artists trying to make it in this fantasy version of Paris. It's not Paris, but you know, it's pretty much Paris. And this is taking inspiration from the historical time period of the Belle Okay. Probably not saying that right, but it is like almost the turn of the century. Think Moulin Rouge, the movie. So, you know, there's a lot of things on the art scene at that time. But in this world, one of our main character knows that there is magic, one of them doesn't. Most people don't know that there is magic in this world because it is so far gone from the everyday citizen, because it comes from the land of Fae. These two girls are basically trying to find a way to pay the rent, and they get involved in this huge magical heist almost situation. And I would say that's the main problem for me personally. Like, this is a personal thing of why I didn't enjoy this book as much as I was hoping to, and that is because I don't like fetch quest stories, and this was a fetch quest, which basically means someone tasks them with having to go get something, and it's them gathering all these little pieces and then going to get the big thing at the end. I've never really liked those kind of stories. I like heist stories, but I don't really like fetch quest stories, if that makes sense. With heist stories, there's a little bit more espionage, there's a little bit more planning, and fetch quest is a little bit more on the run, a little bit more of a quest feel, and I'm not big on quest stories either, so fetch quest stories have just never been my thing. This was cute. This is sweet. I want to do a recommendation video for this because I do think people will like this and I do want more people to read it. The writing I thought was pretty good. Again, this is really short, so there wasn't a lot that could be done, a lot of fleshing out of the characters in the world, but I thought with the amount of space that was allotted, I felt like it did a pretty decent job. But like I said, this book is a fetch quest and we go to the Fae Kingdom to kind of deal with that, which was unfortunate because, again, like I said, the setting was really interesting. I really liked the historical kind of fantasy twist aspect that we had going on, so I kind of wish we didn't leave that world. Both of the big problems that I have with the story are more personal taste issues. Do with that what you will. I still really enjoyed this and I do want to recommend it because it was sweet. The next book I read was Tasha Suri's The Jasmine Throne. This I gave like a 3.5 stars to. This is the start of an epic fantasy series. It's another sapphic book. It was Sapphic September and I accidentally read almost all sapphic books. Don't know how that happened. 5 sapphic books, so yay me. But this was one of them that I ended up picking up. But this takes place in a magical kingdom. There is this all-powerful kingdom that is slowly taking over all the other kingdoms surrounding it, and at the head of the kingdom is the prince that has recently taken power and is a little power hungry and is using religion as a way to kind of enforce his views. And so this takes place in one of those territories that he has like recently kind of taken over and is subjecting a lot of new rules and regulations into. Basically, these people are getting oppressed because of this. They have their own religion, and so this new regime is really like disrupting their way of life, and like they're going after their poets and their religious leaders and all this kind of stuff. So our main characters are Princess Malini and Priya. Priya is kind of the character we start out with. She is living in this ostracized kingdom. She has a past that the book slowly gets into with her connections to the religion and to magic that was produced by the religion. But previously she has been living on the street. She got herself a job working as a maid for like the governor of this province territory. And so she is now working under the governor's wife, who she has a history with. But you know, she's just trying to survive. She's just trying to live out day to day, and she's using all of her money and resources to try and help children that are living on the street, because there is also this thing going around that is it called the curse? It's some type of magical ailment that is hurting people and seems to be spreading among people, but there's no way to like really tell how people are catching it, kind of a thing. Unfortunately for her, she gets assigned to be Princess Malini's maid at some point, and Princess Malini is a princess from the ruling kingdom. Her brother is the one that is exiling her, and during her exilement, she has been slowly drugged by one of her caretakers to the point where she is not as strong and capable as she once was. She was this powerful political figure who was really good at court politics. Now when she's meeting Priya, she is basically a shadow of her former self, but it's them forming this connection and trying to escape. This book is really like the introduction to the world, giving us the magic. There is a bigger plot. We do end on a note where it's like things are about to change, but a lot of this book is setting up things for the rest of the series, and I feel like that's my major problem with this book, is that this is like the setup book. This is the start of the series. series, this is where you're going to give me the world building, the religion. You're going to really give me those characters so that I can really understand and sympathize with them and really feel for this relationship that is coming together and pulling apart. And unfortunately, it felt like we were lacking a lot. It really felt like this book did not flesh out a lot of things. There was a problem with how the author relayed information, but there was also just a problem with not receiving enough information overall. There is a lot about religion in this book. I don't feel like I could tell you who the gods are, how this religion was practiced, how it is now. I don't feel like I could tell you how this kingdom looks, how its architecture looks. There's a lot of importance on different buildings. I don't feel like I could tell you what they look like or how they function. There was just a lot missing from that world building aspect, which it felt like this book was trying to set up. And again, the way that information was revealed, I felt like it was holding back stuff because it didn't want to tell you everything right away, which is a really good strategy, but just the way that information was delivered, it's a difficult task to do for an author, and I don't feel like this fully succeeded. I personally had some ideas of how things could have been done differently. Because, like, if I have my main character who grew up in this temple and is now, this temple has been converted into a space for the governor and she's now living there again, if she's looking upon this building, she should have a sense of familiarity with it, but also, like, this sense of, I don't know, disgust, distaste, disappointment, something when she's looking upon the world that has changed so much and that she's familiar with, but also has had a lot of trauma around. And, like, yes, she has, like, forgotten memory problems, but, like, that doesn't mean you wouldn't look at something and, like, have feelings about it. Especially, like, when you're introducing, like, these important buildings, important areas to us, the reader, as well. I felt like this book really struggled with a lot with pacing, a lot with character introductions and world building introductions, magic introductions. I really liked these characters. We have morally gray women. There's another older mentor figure that I especially really loved. But again, Princess Milani is, like, in this drug state, so it just didn't make sense personally to me why her and Priya were really connecting, because they're not really having that many conversations. Again, she is like a shadow of her former self, and we didn't really get to see her as this courting, powerful woman. And if I would have seen that transformation, I felt like I would have had a lot more sympathy. Not that I didn't have sympathy for her, but it would have just grown my attachment to her as a character if I would have seen her really, you know, what she used to be and what she is now. There were a couple good flashback moments, but just not enough, and not enough in the beginning. We're only seeing her as she is now, and so why is she connecting with Priya? I get the interest, but I don't get, like, where they're getting this great bond from. So overall, there were a lot of good elements here. There was a lot I liked. Again, I really do like these characters. I find them really fascinating, and just, like, we have three powerful women that are all different from each other and all interesting. Unfortunately, there was just so many elements missing for me personally that I felt like the world and the characters and everything just didn't feel fleshed out or explained the way I wanted it to, and so that's why this got like a 3.5 stars. I'm still continuing the series though. So the next book I read was Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. This is a short little novella. It is a crime, detective, fantasy, paranormal noir story that takes place in a version of the 1960s, 1950s. Again, this is another sapphic book, and our main character is basically ostracized by the, like, magical police kind of situation. She's on her own doing these detective stints, but suddenly she gets entangled into a job that she never wanted to be a part of, that is bringing up things about her past and her lover's past. And I had a lot of fun with this. I thought the setting was interesting. I liked the magic. I liked having this short, sweet, fun little story. I will say that this book deals with, like, angels, demons, heaven, and hell, which I was enjoying in the first part of, but it started to bring about a lot of weird questions about, you know, sitting in heaven and hell for me towards the end, that I'm like, is this saying what I think it's trying to say, or did it not quite stick the landing, kind of a thing? But overall, it was fun, it was enjoyable, like a 3.75. I'm interested in reading other books by this author because I did enjoy this. The next book I have was a 4-star for me, and that was Dracula by Bram Stoker. I've been reading this slowly since like May, and I finally just hunkered down and finished the rest of this. This is a classic novel, and this is a story told through letters, told through journal entries, but we start off with Jonathan Harker, who has this job that he's going out to Transylvania to do for his boss, and then dun dun dun, he meets Dracula, and things get really weird from there. Eventually he goes back home to Britain, and weird stuff starts happening in England among his friends. And so I really enjoyed this. This is like a great mystery thriller. I was on the edge of my seat, but it was super well paced. I really love the format of journal entries and letters, and in a lot of ways, like, the language in this, it just felt really modern. I really, really enjoyed this, and I could see myself really loving to discuss this in a classroom setting. But like with a lot of classics, especially our British classics, there is like a lot of internalized and not so internalized like misogyny or just weirdness around women, xenophobia. This book could probably be summed up as a big allegory for like xenophobia, let's be real. So racism, colonialism, all that stuff. Personally, to me, that just adds another layer to the text that makes this really fascinating and really worthy of like essays to be written about it. I could definitely see myself dissecting this and writing an essay. So like on a story level, this was really good, but also if you don't want to read classics and you don't want to read like this classic, I completely understand why you might not want to do that. But I will say that I personally had a lot of fun with this, and I found it just a really intriguing read. And then my final read for September is going to be A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I've read Uprooted and Spitting Silver by Novik. I planned on reading this, but it wasn't at the top of my TBR because I heard some like weird things about this book. But then I also heard that this is dealing with a main character who is kind of bitchy, and I was like, okay, this is my perfect book. But if you don't know, A Deadly Education is a dark academia style fantasy novel where we are in a world where when you come of age at like 14 and you are a magic user in this world, you're basically punted into this magical school that is infested by these creatures that are trying to kill you. In the outside world, it is much more dangerous, apparently. So we're basically throwing y'all in here and you have a better chance of survival, but it's not great. This school is basically trying to kill you. So this book follows our main character, Elle, or Galadriel, as she was so lovingly named by her mother. She's been living in this school for, I believe this is her 3rd year. So she's about to become a rising senior, which is not great for this world because basically when you escape on graduation day, you have to deal with all the monsters that were just like waiting at the depths for you. She doesn't have an alliance. She doesn't have any friends. She is very close to feeling like she is going to probably not make it out of this. But things start to change when she attracts the attention of Orion Lake, who is basically the golden boy who's been destroying Mal for everybody around him. And they start a grumpy sunshine friendship dynamic, or not even friendship, like tentative like relationship, I guess. Yes, magical school, dark academia, you kind of get the gist. The reason why this is rated so high for me is 1, because I do enjoy the characters. I think they're a lot of fun. And also 2, I have been, as you can probably tell, I've been craving world building so desperately. I need a magic system. Is info dumping the best way to tell things? Maybe not, but I'm craving it so desperately. Like, I just want a world that feels like a fleshed out world, that feels like the author took a lot of time and care to write it down and talk about it and doesn't feel kind of wishy-washy or in the background. I just desperately needed a book that was focused on that. And so when I picked this up and it started info dumping, I was honestly just really enjoying myself. I was like, oh, thank God, I can finally live in a world. It feels real, and I was just really enjoying myself with this. I don't want to say it's controversy because that's not like the right word to call this. A lot of people have problems with this book because it is a white author writing a biracial character and writing them biracial in a way so that they don't know their BIPOC identity. And also there were some lines that were taken out in later editions of the book because people are like, that's not the best way to talk about hair and hair care, and adds some really bad implications even though it's fantasy explanations for it. And so like I was aware of some of those things going in and I noted them, thought about them. I don't want to speak to those racial or identity issues because it's obviously not my place, but I did want to note them, and there are reviews discussing that on Goodreads that you can go in and see, you know, the nitty-gritty of why people thought those things. So I definitely have authors that I do not cross a line for, that I don't really want to engage with or read or promote because they have done things, said things, had things in their books, whatever. But I guess I have to lump Naomi Novik in with these people, but I have a whole other group of authors where I'm just like, they've done some weird shady things, they've written some things that are interesting choices, maybe should have been beta readed, maybe should not have been published that way. Like I said, that's a big group of people, honestly, and it's like, if you discount everybody, there are no books to read. It's important to have a line for yourself of like, okay, I don't want to read this series because it does such and such or whatever. But for me, Naomi Novik has not quite crossed that line yet, but it's also like, I don't want to just talk about this and gush about it without noting that there are problems with it and that people have problems with it, because that seems disingenuous. You know, she's someone I'm watching, just so you know. didn't want to ignore it, but I am enjoying the series and I'm still reading it, so my review with a grain of salt. But yes, this was my favorite book of the month. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. So now that we have discussed all the books that I've read, don't worry, I didn't forget about you, Magical Readathon. Let's just go through what I read for the Magical Readathon because that was this month as well, and I read all the books that I needed to. So for the Magical Readathon, I had a couple different prompts. I had to read a book with my name in the title, which I read Can't Spell Treason Without T. This one I particularly had to pick up because I needed a U very desperately, and this has a U in it. Having an 8-letter name is definitely not great for these kind of challenges. I had to read a book following the prompt of my gemstone, which is Garnet, so I needed a red book, and I picked up The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. It's got some red flaps, it's got a red spine. Physical book is red, so I feel like that prompt was filled in nicely. I had to read a book with an orange cover. Orange was the color I spun on a wheel, and so orange is what I get. And I read A Liaison with Her Leading Lady. It's got orange again. Harlequin historicals are always orange now. I read a book with a number in the title, and I kind of cheated and used Yona of the Dawn, volume 42. That's a number, so there you go. And for my last prompt, I had to read a book with a non-human character, and this is where I differ from my original plans. I didn't quite get to the book I was meaning to get to, so I'm using Morgana and Oz for this prompt. We have a witch, we have a vampire, they're seen as different non-human beings in this world. So I thought that did nicely for that. And so yeah, I was able to complete all of the prompts that I set out for myself and read most of the books that I planned to read. So the Magical Readathon was a success for me. And in general, this reading month was a success for me. I read a lot of books, not a lot of great books because I didn't have any 5 stars and I didn't have a lot of 4 stars, but still most of this stuff I would recommend. I did enjoy, and I'm planning on discussing them more possibly in some reviews, so look forward to that. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.